Welcome to the Low Carb Athlete Podcast, where we focus on discussing topics to help you burn fat, optimize health, and improve performance in life and sports. Transform the whole you from the inside out with the holistic method. Let's dive in. Here's your host, Debbie Potts.
Hey guys, it's Debbie Potts, and today I'm talking to one of my friends and mentors and fellow FDN practitioners, Ryan Monahan. He was on the show a couple times before to talk about mold toxicity and Lyme disease. Today, Ryan and I are going to dive into a little bit more about how to take information we get from functional lab tests and correlate it to other clues that we pick up to help put your missing pieces of the puzzle together to restore the whole you back to your optimal self, homeostasis, so you can thrive every day instead of struggle and just not ever feeling yourself. So I'm really on a mission to share this information with you this season on the podcast because, as I share each time, 10 years ago is when my life changed, and I finally feel like I'm able to focus my energy on coaching athletes full time, how to best fuel, train, and perform for their daily life and specific sports, but also for their aging self, your future self. So Ryan Monahan and I are going to chat a little bit about my lab test, my recent HTMA. I talked to Barton on 2 episodes from Upgraded Formulas about my hair tissue mineral analysis, but just how that information is so important to get, how to test and not guess, to collect more data to really figure out the best program, the best protocol for you to restore your health. If you don't invest, I know it costs money, I know it's a lot, but there's certain labs I would suggest doing to get the whole picture, because you're just kind of piecemealing things together. If you just do blood chemistry, 6 months later, you decide to do a GI test from Genova Diagnostics or GI map, and then we do the Dutch test. And ideally, we figure out how to run a bunch of labs. If you don't have the money, then I do nutritional therapy assessment, and we do blood chemistry you can get from your doctor or Ulta Labs or Direct Labs, and then we go from there. But really, we're still kind of guessing. Then we know, all right, we really should run a couple tests to figure out what's actually going on. But the hair tissue mineral test I found so fascinating because it revealed that I'm a slow oxidizer, and that correlates with slow thyroid and adrenals, and that would be me. And I like to correlate that data with genetics. Look at my podcast with the DNA company and how you can really figure out your why, and that I personally need to supplement with more liver detox support as glutathione. I need to do more B vitamins, more vitamin C. I need more support for my adrenals and thyroid. We need to be able to make the thyroid hormones with tyrosine and iodine. And so there's so much to it, and looking at how's your liver health? Are you congested? Are you able to convert thyroid T3 to the active form T4? Do you have proper conversion? That's a good clue. How's your gut health? A lot of things happen in our gut. And if that gut's broken, inflamed, parasites, yeast overgrowth, dysbiosis, a lot of opportunistic bacteria, endotoxicity, we're probably having leaky gut. And if you have holes in your gut, then you have inflammation in your body. So I just find it so fascinating. That's why I became a nutritional therapy practitioner 10 years ago. Wait, what year is it? Almost 10 years ago. 8 years ago, 2015. I did Czech Institute Holistic Lifestyle Coach before that. And then I really realized I can't really help people with just this alone. I really need to be able to run the functional lab tests, and I became an FDN practitioner in 2019, so I can really put what I created 10 years ago, the holistic method, to transform the whole you from the inside out with the holistic method, 8 elements, but collecting clues to help put that puzzle together with functional lab tests, with the nutritional therapy assessment, with your genetic assessment, with your just general look at your lifestyle. Let's look at your exercise program. Let's look at your HRV scores, your blood sugar scores. Look at what you're doing to start your day, how you're ending your day. So the 8 elements of the holistic method is nutrition and exercise, which doesn't always work. As you know, a lot of people eat less, exercise more, trying to get results, and it backfires most times, especially if you are a high charging individual, as most of us are here, type A, AAA, little driven, and we take everything to the extreme, like fasting, and low carb means 0 carb. And then we start to get malnourished and low energy availability and doing too much fasted workouts when fasted exercise should just be when we're doing low heart rate workout. And look at how long we have fasted overnight, since our dinner, for me, for example, is often by 3:00 I finish eating, and then not being so stuck in our ways that we're not going to eat till the next day. So I'm fasting too much. And that was kind of my story the last few years. So really trying to share my journey, be authentic, share my struggles over the last 10 years, that I was getting better, but then I had some stress with some business issues, with some like really difficult client that caused me a lot of setbacks. I, had trying to exercise more, trying to race again. And then I was getting into OMAD, basically 1 meal a day, and doing fasted exercise and thriving, not eating all day. And then you get that low energy availability. And now my cortisol is low, my thyroid's sluggish, which means my adrenals are sluggish, and everything's just kind of slow. So what do? Change what you're doing. Don't do the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. Try to relearn how to eat some good nutrient-dense foods, get some good potatoes. I'm so against adding carbohydrate, and it's okay to have an apple with some almond butter or sunflower butter. It's okay to have sliced potatoes cooked with bacon and have some grass-fed butter on it, or have some good prebiotic type of sour cream that's organic. And look at eating more variety of foods. Yes, I eat mostly meat, and I don't do my huge salads anymore. I tend to eat some vegetables. I had some beets and goat cheese yesterday. I'm focusing on more foods that are feeding my microbiome, prebiotic, probiotic, polyphenols, and eating more foods that are supporting my liver, phase 1 and 2 detox pathways, right? And then adding in those lifestyle habits as my new sunlight and infrared sauna, doing that and stacking that with liver sauce and liver detox binders and stuff like that, as well as take an element and getting my creatine and my amino acids and all of that. So it's a lot to take care of ourselves, to really thrive every day. And anyways, Ryan and I are going to talk about about me, about FDN, about health investigation. Ryan's been doing this a while. He's an FDN functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, is an FDN. He's one of our clinical advisors for the medical director board at FDN. So every lab test that I order as an FDN practitioner through our medical director, I have a 30-minute consult with one of our medical directors. Okay, so it's not just me making up crap. I'm actually researching on my own when I get labs back and learning, because every test I get is new, because every client's lab results are different. They're unique because that person is unique. And then I see someone as Ryan to go over results and correlate the data to see what I might be missing. So Ryan is also national board certified with the National Board of Health and Wellness Coaches. He's a certified Autoimmune Protocol Coach with a passion of uncovering hidden stressors that contribute to thyroid disease. Ryan spent over 10 years visiting more than 40 health professionals to find answers to his chronic health complaints until being diagnosed with Hashimoto's in 2012. Since then, his mission has been similar to mine, to help change the dialogue with chronic disease towards holistic functional approach. With the help of cutting-edge functional lab work, Ryan helps his clients to identify the true root causes of their primary health challenges so they can stop wasting time and resources and start living their best life. Typically, his clients are those who struggled with finding relief from their autoimmune symptoms. Oftentimes, they feel that they've tried everything and that traditional medicine has not served them well. In his experience, there is a better way. So Ryan is super fun to talk to. I was like chatting with him. I often talk to him once a week about different things I need some guidance on and ask him questions. So let's dive in. If you have questions or you relate to any of this, please reach out, schedule a discovery call with me to talk about ways we can help you thrive every day. I know many of you listeners are reaching out more often, and I love it. And I think this is why I do what I do and why I'm on a mission to help other high-performing individuals, athletes of all levels. You don't have to be competing in Ironmans. You can just relate to struggling to get the desired results. You're gaining weight for no reason. Remember, I went from top Ironman athlete, reaching my best time in Ironman Canada. Then I did Ironman Hawaii in 2012. And then I did, 50K North Face trail run that December. And I was just doing my best times all 2012 in all my races I did all year. And then 2013, I did Carlsbad Marathon in the January. And then February, I did this Bellingham 50K trail run. And I had all sorts of red flags. My heart rate was super high. I had to slow down running because I was pacing by my heart rate. And I remember I was doing UCAN and fueling, and I was just struggling. And I finished the run, and my husband had to wait forever in the car for me. It was raining, I remember. And he was sitting there and like, "Where are you?" And that's when everything changed. Then you'll hear another podcast I did with Rhonda Collier, HRV, and we had a Ben Greenfield conference that year talking about heart rate variability and adrenal fatigue, learning this first time. And then I went to my Todd Durkin mastermind here in Torrey Pines. I was living in Seattle, and that's when I was fasting and so strict on eating so low carb. And I was just doing fat, kind of keto and fat coffee. And so if it wasn't the food that I could eat, I didn't eat anything. So then I was doing my sprint workout, end of a retreat that day on a Saturday. And I went to go do my speed work in Torrey Pines. And then we had a party that night. And everyone's like, "Chill out. You're so uptight. Why don't you relax? Have some fun. Have some wine." Well, I decided to loosen up. Long story short, this whole chapter in my book, Life is Not a Race, but I threw up all over the bus. I passed out. We went to this wine tour, and I did that walk of shame off the bus when everyone was getting back on after the party. I passed out, threw up in the bathroom in the bus, and long story you don't want to hear. Maybe you do. You can read about it, but that's 10 years ago. And I started getting help after that with Kalish method with my friend who was becoming a Dr. Kalish program practitioner, and all these red flags started seeing. So what I'm doing now is trying to share this information with you as I go, share the information that Ryan and I talk about, being authentic, sharing those red flags, showing those struggles when we're doing too much and more is not better. And the reason I talk about the Goldilocks effect, what's my why, what's my drive, is because of what happened to me 10 years ago. I was fit, in the best shape of my life, feeling my best. I thought I was so happy, and I was doing so well, and I was training for my next race and Ironman 70.3 in Honu, and I was doing Ironman Canada that year, and never have I done those again. Actually, I tried in 2015, still didn't work. And then I had a bike crash. So long story, but that's kind of my gist of and my mission this year, so you'll keep hearing me. So you probably don't want to hear me. Let's bring on Ryan, and I'll stop blabbing. All right, gang. I have Ryan Monahan, one of our FDN practitioner, medical lab expert, everything I go to for advice, as well as helping investigate what is going on with myself so I can help other people. But Ryan Monahan, we did a podcast a year or two ago about mold. Yeah. Right. And so I wanted Ryan to come back on the show because we've been talking about hair tissue mineral analysis. We did a month or so ago on me, and we did a podcast on that. And I found it really interesting. I thought it'd be great to share with our audience because endurance athletes trying to be fit and healthy, a lot of them are struggling, I think, to get results and pushing themselves too hard and really not looking at the whole picture, as I call the holistic method coaching program, looking at their exercise and nutrition, but also their lifestyle habits, their sleep and their stress management, but also what we do as FDN practitioners, really a health investigator, looking at functional lab tests, multiple and looking at the whole picture. So Brian's on the show to help us kind of dive into some interesting information, how we correlate and how we work as FDN practitioners, as with HTMA, a Dutch test, a GI test, blood chemistry, and really look at the patterns that we see and how we work to figure out a personalized program for a client. So we're going to use me as an example because I give permission to talk about myself on the show. So Ryan, how do you think athletes can help improve their performance in life and their sport, but also taking care of their future self?
Well, it's something that I think anyone could, in our population could benefit from, but especially athletes, just given that they're trying to optimize their peak performance. And looking at a thorough lab investigation gives us an opportunity to kind of look under the hood and investigate the engine and really see what's going on at the cellular level in terms of our nutrient levels, our hormones, mineral levels, also factors that might be inhibiting optimal function. So these are things we know, you and I, Debbie, in the FDN world, we call these hidden stressors. So these are things like infections, toxins, blood sugar dysregulation, hormone imbalances. The list goes on, right? These are often things where many of us can go on living totally unaware of, right? Because we're not necessarily tuned in or connected to what's going on underneath the surface. Even if we feel like we're performing at our best, we're not always the best, most objective judges of what's going on with our own health, right? It's like, I say this all the time, that the last thing a fish would ever notice is water, right? So sometimes we're not even the most, objective judges of what's going on with the picture of our health. And the lab testing, I feel it depersonalizes the whole situation, because it's no longer about your opinion. It's about what the labs are saying to us. And there have been dozens of instances, and I'm sure you've experienced the same thing, working with clients where they come to you just wanting to be proactive and optimize, and then you come to find that there's all kinds of problems when you peer underneath the hood. And as we work through those issues, we might actually find that we weren't at our peak. We weren't at 100% the way we thought we did, right? And so through this kind of comprehensive analysis and this comprehensive holistic approach, as you call it, we end up reaching a whole nother level of plateau in terms of our well-being, whether that's our energy levels, our focus, our performance, our mood. Right. And suddenly maybe we were at 70%. Now we're at 90, 95, 100%. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's why I say, so many people struggle to get the desired results if they're trying to lose weight, get stronger, get faster, just improve their general performance in their sports. But they're doing all the air quotes, right things that they hear about on other podcasts, social media. They're, doing strict carnivore, animal-based diet. They're doing keto, and they're still having issues, and it's backfiring for them. Or they're not eating at all. They're doing extreme fasting because they hear that for cell autophagy and to improve their detoxification and stem cell and growth hormone. And I think I try on this show to go, okay, but you're an endurance athlete, you're exercising regularly. So do you need to do all that fasting? Do you need to do a strict carnivore? Do you need to do a keto type of flex plan? And figure that out, because there isn't one size fits all, as we reveal when we do the functional lab testing and correlate that all together. Right. So I think people, try to do all this, but they're like, I'm still not losing weight, or I'm still not getting faster, or, my recovery is really crappy. They don't really, like you said, we say always, the analogy of the car. How are you needing to get a tune up and overhaul the engine? Are you missing some parts and maybe need some spark plugs and give a little oil change to your body? And I think it's so important to invest in your health, because a lot of people, I always laugh, don't want to spend the money, because it does cost a lot of maybe some lab testing, but And at least start with a general assessment of, let's look at what you're doing and look at your nutrition, look at your plan you're currently doing and assess that to start. But I think a lot of it is, that N equals 1 and looking at how do you feel, and, looking at metabolic typing and look at how you react to foods afterwards and paying attention to how you feel. So it's kind of teaching people to be more intuitive and aware. Oh, I have gas, I have bloating, I have fatigue after I eat, or I have a headache. I mean, there's a lot of free things you can do if you don't have the money to spend on labs. But I'll finish up. I didn't get to my point, was a lot of athletes will drop $10,000 on a bicycle for racing or triathlon gear, or spending money on race registration fees, but they don't want to spend a couple $1,000s on functional lab tests that can actually enhance their performance and their aging process.
And hopefully do that for the long term, right? It's one of the best investments you can make into your health is really running a comprehensive lab analysis and seeing exactly what's going on under the hood. And just like you had said, we might be lured into thinking that a ketogenic diet or carnivore diet or AIP or whatever it is, right? There's all kinds of different therapeutic dietary approaches. And a lot of these can be really alluring when we're following our favorite kind of influencers on social media. But maybe when we're looking at the actual labs, it's telling us a different story, that maybe that dietary approach you're following isn't necessarily the best approach for your unique physiology and your bio-individuality, right?
Mm-hmm.
So again,
digestion.
kind of that idea of letting the lab speak for themselves, having some objective outside data, and just letting that kind of all the swirling of opinions in your head, right? That so many of us have. Like, I have so many clients that come to me not knowing what to believe. And so a lot of it is just guessing. This is playing whack-a-mole. Maybe this diet will work. Let me try that. But yeah, there have been plenty of cases where I'll see what the labs are telling me is this dietary approach or your exercise regimen is not working for you, right? Like a specific example is someone whose adrenals are super burnt out and they're following a vigorous workout, CrossFit, high intensity interval training kind of style of workout or exercise, when their adrenals are asking for more rest and healing and repair and a slow down, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then that's where we have to sort of reevaluate our mindset too, because maybe there's a story we're telling ourselves that we just have to push, right? And where did that come from?
Yeah.
Right. So there's layers to this too, like where did this idea come from? That
therapy, going deep.
That's exactly. You said it, right? So the mindset and one's history of traumas and all this sort of thing, it's all connected.
I find that when I'm working with clients too, that, they'll come to me and they want their exercise program and do the nutrition lab testing. But then I always look at what's the why, what drives you, why are you choosing that? And really you have to work with the mindset first. I said, we're just going to go backwards and you're going to have these same issues again if we don't deal with getting a little deeper and peeling the layers of the onion off, get to more the root causes or triggers of when you say, like, want to go eat a bag of cookies, or you can't deal with that stress at work and you tend to quit everything, or you get overwhelmed. Right. And there's a lot more that I find you end up helping coaching people is being there, a guide and support person, but also, letting them pause and reflect on more than just what they're eating and why.
It's that human aspect to what we do. Because, we are humans and we're not perfect. And if we don't sort of get the mind right, like you said, we might just fall back into our old patterns. Yeah.
Okay. So moving on to the labs, when you are coaching people, and as we do as FDN practitioners, we don't just do one lab, ideally, depending on the person's budget. But so what are your top labs that you think, we talk about all the time ourselves, but what would you suggest people if they're looking at, I want to really improve my performance, I want to work on improving my longevity, my aging process, and be the best version of myself? What do you find works best to kind of get a picture of what's going on right now under the hood?
So whenever I have an initial discussion about this with a client that might be interested in working with me, I'll start off with this sort of analogy that let's just kind of pretend for a moment we go on Amazon and we order a puzzle. And that puzzle box, it comes in the mail, but the picture is not on the front. So we don't know what it is yet. But we open up the box and there's just one puzzle piece in that box. So I look at that one puzzle piece and I'm kind of scratching my head. I'm trying to determine what this actual image is. And I can't tell. I can't tell if it's a landscape or a bowl of fruit or a vase of flowers or a bunny rabbit or a train. I have no idea, right? Because I just have one puzzle piece. So I need all those puzzle pieces in order to see the full picture. And that's very much what it's like to run a comprehensive lab investigation. So another way I'll frame this to clients, I'll say, if you want me to build you a house, I need some bricks. And if we're mason workers, then those labs, those are our bricks for you and I. And each one of those puzzle pieces or bricks, it reveals a new aspect of the healing picture. One lab might give us an insight into hormones, another into minerals, another into gut health, another into liver health, another into toxin exposure. So someone might ask, well, why is there not just one test to rule them all, that can show us all of this stuff? It's just not the way it is. And I would say one of the reasons is because different labs, they specialize in these different areas over the years, and different forms of collection, whether it be stool, urine, blood, saliva, hair, they're all providing different insights that are unique to that collection method. Right? So there's no one way we can get all the lab information we need from one place. We need all these different perspectives. But once we have a body of lab work to work with, then the picture becomes clearer and clearer as we go along, and we're able to see how all the dots are connecting and start to see, I think of them as like themes. And what are the major themes for this person? Maybe it's just something simple like chronic mental and emotional stress or job-related stress, and that's taxing the adrenals. And because that's taxing the adrenals, it's causing some other mineral imbalances or hormone imbalances over here. And all that stress can also suppress the immune system. Now, if the immune system is suppressed, then we're going to become more immune compromised. We're going to become more vulnerable to pathogens, right? So now that's where we end up with things like H. pylori, bacterial dysbiosis, yeast and candida, parasites. So you could see how the dominoes fall. And that's just one very simple example, but that's just something starting with someone who's living with chronic stress, compromised adrenals, compromised immune function, being more vulnerable to pathogens. Those pathogens now are a source of chronic inflammation in the body. And that inflammation, once it becomes chronic, is going to further suppress the immune system. And it becomes this like vicious circle. Right?
Yeah.
But again,
brain inflammation too.
Exactly.
Memory brain fog, as I have.
Yep.
Yeah.
All
But that's why, like
you're
so good at explaining. You're much better at analogies and your stories than myself. So that's why I wanted you to explain it, because you're so good at that. But I think that's such good information why people should invest in their health, and your health is your wealth, that you need to take action instead of just training for races all the time and working on improving your watts on your bike and your run speed, but really look at the whole athlete, as I say, with my 8 elements that I coach people on, and then, tie in these labs and really personalize a program, because a lot of times people aren't aware of their symptoms. And as you said, all these hidden internal stressors might come up that people had no idea that they had, because you're normal. You've gotten used to how you feel, and you might be kind of think you're thriving, but you could feel so much better. And you have no clue that you have all this stuff going on inside of you that's holding you back from being even more of a peak performer. That if we can address these issues and deal with that now, before it gets worse too, that you could be, just coming up, you feel like I'm pretty good, I don't have any symptoms. Then you find out all this hidden internal stress is like, well, your good is not your best. Do you want to feel your best, or do you just want to, survive the day?
I just had a thought that came to my mind, this idea of peak performance. what if it's equally important to be a peak relaxer,
Well, they
right?
say train hard, but recover harder. So that's kind of the thing
Yeah.
is like,
Thinking of it as like,
train.
I want to be the best person in the world at just chilling and relaxing and giving my body rest and repair. Right? Getting,
Yeah.
being equally as competitive about that, because the harder you push yourself, the more you need to rest and recover. It's equally important. And over exercise can be just as much of a stressor on the body as under exercise. And I think that fact is underappreciated. So one classic example from our world is that, over exercise can cause a lot of oxidative stress in the body. And that oxidative stress drives cellular damage. That's essentially what oxidative stress is. It's a form of cellular damage. It's oxidation, leading to, there's a buildup of free radicals that are causing damage to the cells and the contents of our cells, even the mitochondria and the DNA in our cells. And that can accelerate the aging process. That's kind of one of many of the bigger concerns of overdoing it with exercise.
Well, that kind of good segue into the topic that I could just chat for hours with Ryan because he's so fun to talk to. But I am on my 10-year anniversary of when my life changed. If people don't know my previous life, I was a top Ironman performer in my age group and did Ironman Hawaii, did 15 Ironmans and qualified 5 times for Ironman Hawaii. And I did Boston Marathon multiple years. And I had a 3:12 as my best marathon in Boston and 3:17. And my half marathon times, I got to 1:35. I was doing 50K trail runs. I was super top of my shape, strongest I've ever been, fastest in 2012. And then boom, March 2013, I got ran over by a truck. I couldn't do anything. I had struggled on my bike rides. I would just hit me that I had no energy. And then that downhill spiral domino effect happened. So there is a reason to my passion, my purpose, and my mission is to help you driven, ambitious, high charging athletes to avoid going through what I went through, because I'm not doing a marathon anymore. I'm not doing long distance events because my body got burned out and broken. And it is that domino effect, as you said, the immune system down from excessive stress for me, it was running my own business, my own fitness studio with, huge rent every month and the pressure of that. And just financial stress of never even getting paid, and you have to run your business. But then there's the exercise. I was training a ton. I was teaching classes too, but I was doing, 20 hours a week of training probably. So then you have to look at this whole domino effect that we're talking about, and that you have to change the way you live and how you show up to your day, how you start your day and how you end your day. And all that didn't really happen for me until, thank you to COVID, that pandemic, that it was forced me to change my lifestyle. And so, but because of that, I want to get to the second half of our call today, talking about the HTMA and how that correlates with my adrenal exhaustion background, HPA axis, which is really HPA / gonads / thyroid, that I have this dysfunction. And looking at a GI test and look at my blood chemistry, it is an ongoing journey. And till you really resolve where those stressors are coming from, not just the external stresses I did moving away from my life, but my hidden internal stressors that will come up. And if you don't resolve those and you don't figure out, what keeps impacting your health, it's just this ongoing challenge. So we have to really stop, pause, and reset and reboot the system and really look at from a holistic perspective, as we do as coaches, as FDN practitioners / investigators. So anything on that, Ryan? And I'd like to talk about the first thing, HTMA, the slow oxidizers after that versus fast, and how the way of living life as a race, as my book is called, Life is Not a Race, it is a Journey. What happens is an example of me with what we found in my HTMA versus labs, and putting that together as a good example of what athletes can do when they're overtraining and have too much stress in their life.
Well, I'll just say your story really resonates with me. And my health crisis was about a little just slightly before yours. Mine was 11 years ago. And so it was last year I celebrated my 10-year, I call it my Hashiversary.
Oh, that'd be,
So,
well, I'm not Hashi's, but yeah, I'm right there.
But kind of very similar story. I was just kind of pushing the limits of what I was capable of, burning the candle at both ends, just overworking myself, not getting enough sleep, not eating well. And that all came to bite me in the butt, right? And I had that crisis where I often describe my life in 2 chapters, like everything before that event and everything after, because it really did radically change everything for me. And for nearly a decade leading up to that diagnosis, most of my 20s was spent experiencing chronic fatigue, brain fog, depression, debilitating allergies and asthma. And I would have these sinus infections multiple times a year that I would have to take prednisone for just to be able to breathe through my nose. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. But I just very much wanted to say that I resonate and empathize with your story.
High five.
High five. Yeah.
I know, but I think that's why my mission this year is to share my story more often, because I really didn't share it. I wrote my book, but I didn't do anything about it really right afterwards. It was more my therapy to write the book, but then I still was busy with my studio until this past year. It's like, I see so many people breaking themselves down out there and overtraining and fasting too much, not eating enough, not getting their protein and healthy fats. And it's really shocking to me that how many people can survive that. But it is like you probably found yourself is I didn't just hit the wall 2013. It was, what was I doing? All those red flags I somehow didn't see because I thought I was doing amazing, being invincible, super charger, high performer, that I could have prevented possibly what I went through. So I don't know. So that's why I feel like people should invest in their health now, not get to how messed up I was when I found my labs, getting help when I started to investigate. But anyways, a good example of slow oxidizer. Explain what a slow oxidizer versus fast oxidizer and a little bit on that.
Absolutely. Would it be helpful to give a little bit of context to the HTMA test, or should we dive right into?
We can just a summary of it because people can go back and listen to Barton. We did a 2-part seminar or a podcast on that last month. So look back to Upgraded Formulas, Barton part 1 and 2, and the video is best because we shared my lab test results from HTMA.
Awesome. Yeah. So that'll give a great foundation and background for your listeners. So just to give a very quick summary then, with a hair analysis, basically we're able to measure through a hair sample the levels or concentrations of these really critical minerals in our body at the cellular level, at the tissue level. That the hair is a very good approximation of those mineral levels in the body, which is pretty cool. And it gives us kind of a long-term picture over, say, like a 3 to 5 month period. Because of the fact that our hair grows very slowly, we're getting like almost like this archaeological record of our mineral status in the body. So we could think of these minerals as performing like a countless number of metabolic functions. Sometimes we refer to them as like the spark plugs of the body, right? So especially minerals like magnesium and sodium and potassium. Sodium and potassium, right? We're talking about the electrochemical potential of the body because these are electrically charged minerals. That's where the term electrolyte comes from. So to your question, Debbie, that was just a tiny little background. This slow oxidizer pattern is basically one where those electrolytes are really depleted, especially relative to calcium and magnesium. Those 2 minerals tend to have a more calming or sedative effect on the body, whereas sodium and potassium are more energizing, more stimulating. Now, the balance between those 4 is of the greatest importance on the entire HTMA test, mainly because they're the most abundant minerals in the body. So therefore, they have a really strong effect on our metabolism, our physiology, our symptom presentation, right? So we need those minerals to be in balance to feel normal, basically, experience normal optimal function. Athletes are at greater risk for losing electrolytes because we sweat out a lot of sodium and potassium when we work ourselves up to a sweat. Also, those that are on a ketogenic diet, they're more likely to lose a lot of sodium. So these are just two populations you're probably working a lot with. They're going to be at risk for greater losses of sodium and potassium. And you're probably going to see a higher percentage of these folks with low levels. So a slow oxidizer, and let's kind of just look at that term for a minute. What does that mean? Because that term seems just like kind of far out. What is an oxidation rate oxidizer? And I'm going to just keep it really simple and just say the oxidation rate I think of as the metabolic rate, the rate at which all of the processes that your cells are performing, like are they being performed at a nice even tempo, like a kind of even rate? Are those processes all overly stimulated and wound up? That would be like a fast oxidative rate. Or with a slow oxidizer, which is the most common thing we see on the HTMA test, that's where all the cellular processes are slowing down, right? So if your cells are sort of hypo-functioning, then they're going to slow down, like their production of energy in ATP, for example, or that electrochemical potential won't be there, which is obviously like the most foundational thing to contract and use your muscles. You're an athlete. So a slow oxidizer is someone who has very slow metabolic function at the cellular level and at the tissue level. And the main thing we want to do to correct that pattern is support those electrolytes with lots of sodium, lots of potassium, both in the diet and through supplementation. There are other things we could do to support a slow oxidizer, like we want to support the adrenals usually, because those slow oxidizers are usually going to have slow thyroid function and slow adrenal function. So that's where we're going to want to think about things like vitamin C or vitamin B5 that can support the adrenals. But also, because this is important to mention, and I should have mentioned it earlier, but the majority of, let's kind of address the question, why? Why are so many people in this slow oxidative state? Because I've had the opportunity and benefit of looking at hundreds, maybe over 1,000 HTMAs. I would say at least 70, I'm being generous, conservative rather, maybe even 80% of the lab tests I look at are slow oxidizers. It's this very common pattern of kind of either high calcium and magnesium and or low sodium and potassium. So Dr. Lawrence Wilson, he was like one of the original OGs, like one of the founding fathers of the HTMA test itself. I think he still sits on the board for Analytic Research Labs, the lab that runs one of the more popular HTMA tests. And he says when you're in a slow metabolic state, this kind of, we could also call it a parasympathetic dominant state. Well, normally we associate being parasympathetic dominant with rest and digest, with like a calm nervous system state. But he says that this is not a normal state to be in. It's an adaptation to years and years and years of chronic stress that have led to this mineral imbalance. And to some extent, your body has created this imbalance to force you to say, hey, slow down. It's time to heal and relax and repair. Let's repair these wounds that you've accumulated over the years, whether that's mental and emotional or physiological, right? So I just wanted to make that point, that because if we're not addressing the underlying stress that led to this imbalance, we're very likely just to end up right back where we started, which we talked about a little bit earlier with the mental and emotional stuff. So that's going to be a critical part of the picture with a slow oxidizer is getting them to identify the need to focus on stress reduction and incorporate more rest and think about things like massage, Epsom salt baths, acupuncture, and so on and so on, gratitude, things that are going to put us in that healing state, right? So, and I think that mostly answers the question about slow oxidizers. They're in need of rest and repair, and they're also in need of supporting the adrenals and the thyroid and lots and lots of electrolytes to kind of bring things back online. It's like, I say the slow oxidizer is like someone who ripped the spark plugs out of their engine. They've got no spark plugs.
Yeah. So I think I find it fascinating how it correlates with everything else. That, okay, you just said it's related to low sluggish thyroid and low adrenals.
Mm-hmm.
So what if someone just does a blood chemistry panel and they have, low thyroid, and maybe they do a Dutch test, and most people don't do that, but typically people more popular would be blood tests with their doctor and their low thyroid, and they take thyroid medication. Mm-hmm. And they don't really look at that. Okay, why is my thyroid low? And so many other factors that go in with the conversion of T4 to active T3 and the liver and then the gut health, but how the hair tissue mineral analysis gives this clue that there's something going on with the thyroid and with the adrenals. So that's why I always find it fascinating to really collect these clues as an indication to looking at something else as well and putting it all together.
Really great question. And I feel like that's one I'm pretty equipped to answer as someone with a thyroid, history of Hashimoto's myself. And that's one of the primary populations I work with is clients with hypothyroidism and then Hashimoto's. So I'll give you a specific example that I see a lot, and I'll keep this more brief, but I see a lot of clients that have been on thyroid medication for years, and it, got them 30, 50% better, but they're still hitting a wall with their symptoms. They're still feeling brain fog and fatigue and weight gain, constipation, weight loss resistance, a lot of these things that are common with slow thyroid function. And they're like, why am I still not feeling better? Like, I run my thyroid labs with my doctor twice a year and everything looks quote unquote normal, maybe even from a functional perspective. Right? So what they're maybe very likely missing is the mineral piece. So one thing that's extremely important for the way your body handles thyroid hormone is actually your potassium levels. One of those 4 macro minerals we talked about. It's one of the most abundant minerals in the body. We need about 5,000 milligrams of it a day, which, by the way, most of us aren't even getting more than a third of that, right? That's
and it's super hard to get it.
It's challenging, right?
Yeah.
So, but the important thing about potassium is it helps our cells receive and take in that thyroid hormone. So here's what I'm getting at. See this all the time. Clients' thyroid labs are all perfectly normal in range, but then we run the HTMA and their potassium levels are critically low. Like, we want to see on the HTMA, the potassium maybe between, roughly like an 8 to a 15, right? But I see all the time where potassium levels are at like a 1 or a 2 or a 3.
Well, I'm looking at mine. My calcium was 207 and potassium was a 4.
So, 4 is pretty low. We want to see that like ideally at like a 10, right? Or a little higher. So a lot of room for improvement there. But basically, to pull this all together, your thyroid levels could be totally normal in your blood, but without enough potassium, your cells, it's almost like having like a weak cell phone signal, right? I have my phone on my desk, right? It's like the other person calling you, they've got 5 bars on their phone. So their signal's really good, but I'm on the receiving end and I've got a very weak signal. So I still can't hear what they're saying. Right. So gave you one of my classic analogies there.
I was going to say, there's another one.
There's another one. So yeah, without that potassium, you can have all the thyroid hormone circulating in your blood, but your body won't be able to use it very well. So again, I often like to say that potassium, in my opinion, is maybe the most underrated nutrient for thyroid health.
Yeah. And I think no one really thinks of it. I pulled up some charts of where to get potassium foods. And I think a lot of people avoid those foods, especially if they're trying to do a keto carnivore, to eat potatoes. Oh my gosh, it's a carb, it's so funny how
potatoes, sweet potatoes, carrots, parsnips, celery, but also avocados are very high. Salmon is very high. So that there are ways to do it if you're really trying to maintain that more ketogenic diet.
Yeah, beet greens. Here's my list. Beet greens are 28%. Those are 1,309 milligrams cooked. But who eats beet greens?
Not many people.
Avocados are 975 milligrams. Salmon is 1,068.
Mm-hmm.
And then potatoes are 926. The russet potatoes.
Yep.
Acorn squash, white button mushrooms, and then there's tomato and bananas and milk. But I don't do those myself. But anyway, I think salmon is just looking at what foods you can have that to add in potassium. And then, I've been doing my liquid drinks that have all my nutrients in it too. But I just wanted to share that analogy that you have and just how important it is to look at our minerals as well as your blood work. But also, looking at your gut health I just can't do someone's investigation without knowing what else has gone on in the gut that's causing this kind of different metabolic chaos. I think it gives us so many clues to correlate with the mineral test and the blood test.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And there can even be some additional insights you can get from an HTMA. I would say a better word is clues. So, for example, if you see very high cobalt levels, that can be a really strong indication that the liver is backed up, the liver is congested. Mm-hmm. So then the question as to, well, what's causing the liver congestion, then you're going to have to dig in and look at some other labs to find out what's causing that. And it could be a range of reasons. The client's drinking too much alcohol, diet high in refined carbohydrates or sugars, maybe a lot of toxin exposure, due to like someone's occupation. Maybe they have heavy metal fillings, right? So there can be lots of things going on there too. So, there's a whole like world to the HTMA in and of itself. And that if you have a really trained eye, you can potentially identify other kinds of hidden patterns that might be going on.
Yeah. But you don't just do that test by itself. You do it with other tests.
100%. Yep. Going right back to that puzzle analogy. Yeah. So typically when I'm working with a client over a longer period of time, say like 6 months, I'm usually looking at a GI map, an organic acid test, some blood chemistry, the HTMA I run on every single client, no matter what. Sometimes I'm running some food sensitivity tests. Like I really like the Vibrant Wellness Zoomers. So really whatever it takes to get the job done. Usually with those sort of foundational labs, we're able to see most of what we need to see. But there are cases where we go, well, maybe there's something going on here where we need to deepen or broaden the investigation. Let's say that maybe something like Lyme disease or SIBO or mold, things that aren't necessarily common to every person, but we're seeing enough evidence and through their history and through the labs that we might need to kind of keep digging, right? And that's what it's all about. It's like digging until you strike gold, until you find the answers you're looking for, because bringing this full circle, like this whole thing would fall apart if I didn't have this foundational belief. And that foundational belief is that symptoms don't happen randomly. They don't happen in a vacuum. There's always a cause. Like I believe we live in a logical universe, right? Where long gone are the days where I don't know, I just have diabetes because I guess my mom and dad had it, right? That's just so antiquated and outdated, that kind of genetic deterministic view that there was nothing I could have done. Well, maybe it wasn't a genetic predisposition, but it was because of the environmental fact, the fact that you grew up eating pasta every night with mom and dad. And that has nothing to do with genetics. That's habitual. That's environmental, right? Yeah. So, I really do fundamentally believe that any condition or diagnosis, no matter how complex, it has a cause behind it. And if we can identify it, call me an optimist, but I think we could just about resolve or reverse anything. Yeah. And I'm not using the word cure here because, like with an autoimmune disease, you can never cure an autoimmune disease, but you can manage it. You can put it into remission, if you even want to use that word. You can get to a point where, like I have, where I've gotten my antibodies back down into a remission range and I'm totally asymptomatic. So the fact that I technically still have Hashimoto's, because it's an autoimmune disease and the immune system has this B cell memory and all that, it doesn't even bother me anymore. I don't care, because as far as I'm concerned, I'm totally happy and healthy and asymptomatic.
Yeah. Well, Ryan, we are out of time, and I know people might want to get a hold of you. You specialize, your clientele is more Hashimoto's, Lyme. What's your favorite kind of area that you work in?
Yeah, thyroid issues are probably number one. Second to that would be mold issues. I work with a lot of clients with mold illness. It's another thing that I've unfortunately had to live through, that I have a lot of experience with. But a whole range of things, just fatigue, weight gain. Really, if you're applying these sound principles and you're running a thorough lab investigation, you can help anybody. If you're really focusing on not the symptoms, but actually the all the dysfunction that's going on underneath. That's the stuff I'm interested in.
Yeah. Well, great. And how can they get a hold of you if they want to connect?
Yeah. So my website is The Mindful Nutrivore, and the same name on all my social media. So on Facebook, I'm The Mindful Nutrivore. On Instagram, I'm The Mindful Nutrivore. Feel free to hit me up, send me a direct message. I always try to reply when I can.
Good. Well, thanks so much for your wisdom and your analogies today and helping us explain kind of the FDN investigative process and how we work on putting the missing pieces of the puzzle together so people can feel, perform, and look their best in life and thrive every day instead of just get through it, struggle.
Oh, absolutely. Anytime. And thank you so much for having me on the show. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the Low Carb Athlete Podcast. If you have any questions, feedback, or topic suggestions, let us know on Facebook or at debbiepotts.net. You can help us to continue to grow by leaving a review on iTunes. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.